Alrighty, I got to figure out where we picked up. So, Helen Fournette is next week. I think that we were talking about the comparison between these two works by Giotto, and we were leaving off with some explanations about what we do in art history when it comes to historical context. Thank you. Great. And I will try not to put my notes on top of it. So, the historical context, the first thing we were talking about was how does historical context affect subject matter? And it mentioned that both of these works were made to decorate altars and churches, right? And that is why the artists both chose the same subject matter, which is the Madonna and Child, because that was the most common theme for altarpieces in Italy during the 13th and 14th century. So the historical context, knowing where they were originally meant to be seen, helps to explain why the artists chose the subject that they did. In addition to that, I had another thought and I've just totally lost it. You ever do that when you start a sentence, you have no idea where you get that halfway through and you're like, okay, now, so I had something else to say and I don't know what it was. Let's see what's coming up next. Right? So they were altarpieces, and there's my word, altarpiece. So if you need to know how to spell these things, you can always go back to the recordings or the PowerPoint and pull these things out as well. Try to spell the things that are uncommonly used. They're different in scale, however. You'll notice that Giotto's work is only in half length, right, when you see it from here up. Whereas the earlier work shows her entirely enthroned, and we see her full figured. Giotto's work is fragmented. There were other panels that have the exact same framing device that were originally flanking it on either side. So as it sat behind the altar, she was in the middle and had these saints from the sides looking in. And three survived. Like one's in Florence, one's in Boston, I can't remember where the third one is, right? And we assume there's at least one more missing. And who knows, there might have been more. And we don't know where they went. I put them this way because they're looking toward her, you know? But it's anybody's guess, right? They probably aren't looking away, but who knows, this one might could have slipped. And the one on the right could be further away, right? So, altarpieces took many forms during the Renaissance. Sometimes they were single panels, right? But sometimes they were multiple panels. And in the 19th century, after the Enlightenment, right, when Napoleon invaded Italy, the works is important. I don't want to blame Napoleon. But these, works, these were no longer seen as devotional objects. They were works of art that were commodities. And why sell one painting when you can sell five? So they sectioned them up, And that's, fortunately for us, we got the Madonna and Child. We had the best one, the biggest one of the whole group. Right? So, Giotto's was the centerpiece of this multi-paneled altarpiece. We don't know how many. Now, the other question about historical context is why the style. We talked a lot about the flatness and the gold, right, that are being used within the work. Well, a lot of what is translated into these Italian works came out of Byzantine examples. I'll explain what that term means, right? But icons that came from the old Byzantine Empire. Now, you might remember this from a history class, you might not. I got all my history from history. Because I could hang it on something, right? I like art, and I could look out, okay, that's what the Byzantine Empire is. First and foremost, right, icons. What's an icon? The thing on the desktop, right? It really just means image, right? The Greek word for image is what that comes from. But icons within Christianity in the Middle Ages were images intended to help focus your prayers. And the majority of them, not all, but the lion's share, were portraits of saints. Okay? And I say portraits of saints rather than, for example, a narrative scene, the scene that tells a story. These don't tell stories, right? They just kind of are, the portraits. And an icon was believed to be an exact likeness of the person who's portrayed. In fact, when people talked about icons, they talked about them being like a stamp that you would use to make a coin. That the face of the person portrayed, in this case the Virgin Mary, was like a stamp, and everything that came off of it image-wise looked exactly the same. And because it was believed to be such a faithful likeness of the sinner, in some circles, icons took on a miraculous nature. They were believed to actually house the presence of the person who's depicted. That the icon is here, because the icon is here. Christ is here. More than that, I think it's really like an immediate conduit between, the question was like a soul. It's like an immediate conduit from earth to heaven, right? And if you said something in front of the icon, she heard you. So if you think about these as objects that are meant to assist your prayers, the idea, of course, is that prayers are more efficacious, right? They're more likely to be heard if they're set in front of a devotional image, right? And this leads to all sorts of legends that we heard through the Middle Ages, where icons are believed to have cried when witnessing sin, or bled when damaged, right? Because the real presence, that's the term they often use, the real presence of the person depicted is there. Now for us, in this class, they're not really buying into that so much in Italy in the 13th and 14th centuries, but it also means that you don't mess too much with the prototype, right? So when we see other images of the Madonna and Child, you'll notice, look at how many things are so similar, even though she's in Catholic. Right? Look at Christ's gesture. Look at the position of her hand with her index finger separated from the other three in bold, right? And how it's in the exact same place in bold, resting on Christ's knee, right? She's sort of gesturing toward him in each of them. And he's, again, with his hand, and there's so many, it's not coincidence, these similarities, right? These similarities are there because the icon was believed to be that important, right? Okay. Now, that's the icon part of the explanation, right? What do we mean by Byzantine? Okay, get this question first.
So it's not the artist trying to do that because he believes in that, but just to give the idea of whoever is going to pray to the image.
Yeah.
That is the same person that they always see in different churches.
I'll try to distill the question for the recording, right? The question is, to what degree is the artist, what's motivating the artist, right? Is the question. And we talked a bit about this on Monday. We have to remember that a lot of what we think of when we think about how artists make works is upended in this period that's different from our normal experience, and that if the artist were to go totally rogue, right? And I can show you this one. If I could just pop out and pop back in, I think it's better. There's this artist in the 20th century, Max Ernst, who did a picture of the Madonna and Child where she's spanking him, right? And it's really funny, right? She's giving him what for. The sort of thing you never see in images of the Madonna and Child, but hey, he's a kid, right? He could make that choice because he's not working for a patron. And he's 20th century and they're questioning all of the traditions. But these artists don't have that opportunity. So I think in many ways they're working with a very tight set of parameters. And so what they want, of course, is that the work of art is going to be beautiful.
If they see the church, all they have to do is
basically, but it's also the patrons who are in the church want to see the same thing. They don't want to be challenged too much with what they're looking at in these things, right? And so if it goes too crazy, then all of a sudden they don't know what it is. And that's what it's also for those who's always in blue, right? In both of these, the colors had symbolism. Blue was the color of fidelity, faithfulness, right? Red is the color of blood. It's the color of Christ's suffering eventually, right? right? That's why he was born. He wears white. There's reasons for these things, right? But the traditions are there so that these works of art can be understood. And if we go back to what I was saying before, I think there's an issue about the conception of what it means to be an artist prior to people like Michelangelo, where we think of the artist, maybe you don't, but there's a history of art. We often think about the artist as genius, right? Michelangelo, Leonardo, Rembrandt, Picasso. These guys are just like, wow, right? They're these names like Shakespeare or Mozart, right? That they're just out there as being head and shoulders above the rest. But these artists aren't thinking that way. That's why these works aren't signed, right? They're craftsmen and they're working a trade, and the works of art are meant to be beautiful. There's no doubt about that. That is a concern. But the works are also meant to be utilitarian. They got a job to do, right? Now I have two hands up front, so go ahead.
Because it's like for they choosing this, but we don't get a lot of classes that they pay for them, that kind of job is called them, and they don't choose.
And that's exactly the idea of the patron is absolutely crucial, right? You hire a band to play at your wedding, you're going to tell them what they're going to pay, what they're going to play. You know, you hire a band to play classical music, and they do a Ramones cover set, you're going to be upset. Or if you hire them to do a Ramones cover set, and they do classical music, you're going to be upset, right? The people who pay the bills get to call the shots, right? And that's certainly the case with this. Danielle, you had your hand up? Oh, okay, very good. Now, that's what we sort of got into the icon subject matter and the fact that it's traced back to these earlier examples. I don't even know when this dates from. It might be as early as the 9th century, right? I couldn't find a date on it. Now, what do we mean when we talk about Byzantine? The Byzantine Empire was the Eastern Church that split from the Western Church. And I'm not saying Catholic here because it's pre-Protestant. Right? Protestantism, 16th century. Martin Luther, 1519. This is before that. So this is just the church. Right? In the 4th, 5th century, we began to see a split between the Italian Western Church and the Byzantine Eastern Church. This eventually morphed in our day and age to the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Greek Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Church, all derived from the old Byzantine Empire. But for 1,000 years, from the time of Constantine the Great in the early 4th century through to the 1450s, there was a thriving and amazing culture centered around the city of Constantinople, which is today Istanbul. Founded by Constantine, the name of the city before Constantine came was Byzantium, thus Byzantine. It's around what is now Istanbul. So in 1454, the Ottoman Turks invaded the old Byzantine Empire, overthrew the last of the Byzantine emperors, right? And it was still called Constantinople up until like the 1920s. Right? And there's a question about Istanbul, Constantinople. You can hear the constant similarity between a changing pronunciation of that. Right? For us, the important thing is that this was a thriving culture, running parallel to Western Europe, with many, many interconnections. And as you can see from the map, southern Italy was part of it. It was a part of the Byzantine Empire, up until around 1050, 1100 or so, maybe 1150, right? Southern Italy was part of the Byzantine Empire. And for centuries after that, because of the proximity, Italy remained a very important trading partner with the Byzantine Empire. Okay? So, for these reasons, when we look at Italian art from the 13th and 14th century, the style is similar. This is how those things translate as well. So it's one thing to just simply talk about the gold background, the flatness, of the piece, or the gold background and the subject matter that we're choosing. It's another thing then to talk about the sort of stylistic choices that continue well past Italy's independence from the Byzantine Empire. Right? So, again, historical context, right, begins to explain these things for us. Knowing where these things come from, that there are traditions that are very, very strong in Italy for very particular reasons. Okay? So, that's one question. The second question is, how do we deal with Giotto's change? What made Giotto maintain some of these things? Yeah, he still got the old background, still the basic arrangement, but what made him do the things we were talking about on Monday? What made him focus on a greater sense of three-dimensional modeling, right? Chiaroscuro we were talking about. What made him more interested in making the Virgin look that much more alive, like she's breathing, or maybe even almost talking? Making Jesus look like a little kid, despite the, he looks like Bobby Hill, actually. But the way he holds her fingers, the sort of tenderness that he's bringing to her. What was it that made Giotto do that? And that's the thing I want to talk about today, right? Yeah.
More influential, more real.
It's much more real, and it's a very, okay, so the question is it more influential than more real? Yeah. This is the direction that art's going to take from this point forward. Small hiccup around the Black Death in the 20th in 1348. But for the most part, when we talk about Renaissance art, even people during the Renaissance look back and said Giotto's the first light of the Renaissance. Because of these three-dimensional lines, because of this realism, right? Now, realism is a tough word. It's not particularly realistic, right? I like naturalism because it seems natural, right? It seems a little Renaissance. He's incredibly influential for that. He's incredibly popular, right? And he's not the only one doing it, as we'll see today, right? There are others as well. But why did he do it? That's our question, right? How can we explain this change? Because we like to think about art as just blasting out and being, hey, I'm a genius, right? But these things don't happen in a vacuum, right? There are usually reasons why artists forge new directions that we look back on as seeming to be very important. Well, that's not entirely it. Actually, it comes from outside sources as well. First of these is, as they began to separate from the Byzantine Empire to the east, we start to see more trade routes opening up with the French in the north. And in French art, going all the way back to the 1100s, we're starting to see realism as well. A sense of three-dimensionality. Look at how wonderfully modeled the roads are. This is a manuscript page. And it's 100 years earlier than Giotto. The French are there well in advance of the Italians because they're not as deeply involved with the Byzantine Empire. Right? So here's an artist drawing the book that we're looking at, and you can see that even though he's a bit spindlier, he's a little bit thinner, more dainty and elegant and refined looking, there still is that sense of trying to achieve some of the details and realism. And the French are far ahead of the Italians in this way. What we know, historically, is that there are greater economic contacts between Italian cities and the French through the course of the 13th century. So, with more French art available, artists even traveling up north, we start to see some of this realism that already began in French art make its way into Italy. Okay. That's one thing, right? That's one of the historical contexts that gets us there, right? And then begin to account for this. The second thing are changes in religion. In the 13th century, right, early part, 1230s, there are two new orders of monks, monastic orders. Now, an order is a group that follows a particular set of rules, right? And monasticism goes back to the 6th century under St. Benedict. So you maybe have heard of the Benedictines, right? They're the followers of the rules established by St. Benedict. And there are various other orders that spring up through the course of the Middle Ages. In the 13th century, there were two prominent orders, brand new, followers of a new set of rules that decided to do something radically different. Now, prior to this, the point of monasticism was to get away from temptation. The point of monasticism was to separate yourself from the world so you could devote your life to God. And that's very, very hard to do, living around money and booze and women. Right? So the monks all decided to live together off in the countryside somewhere in a self-contained, self-supporting environment. They grew their own food, right? They were walled off from the outside. They would give hospice, they would give rooms to people who wanted them, travelers and whatnot, but for the most part they remained separate from the world. That was the monastic ideal. It was adopted by American universities too, right? You think about, you come here, you live in a dormitory, that comes from a monastery. You eat in a cafeteria, that comes from a monastery, right? The idea that you're going to come here and you're going to all devote yourself to one ideal, education. Right? For them it was God. Now, in the 13th century, two new orders sprung up that did something radically different from that. They decided that if they're going to be true Christians, they can't isolate themselves from the world. They've got to spread the good news. So instead of setting up monasteries in the countryside, they set them up in the cities in order to reach out to the people living there. Okay? To preach. And that's what the mendicant orders are the preaching orders. Now, the problem is that when you're living in the countryside, you can grow your own food, but you can't when you're living in the city. So how do they survive? What they did was they relied on donations. Right? So mendicant actually means the begging orders, is what the term means. Right? And they're taking in money that they can use to continue to survive and to go about their mission, which is to reach out. The mendicant orders. Now, in reaching out to the world, they realized that they couldn't do what is already happening in the churches, which is when somebody goes here to Mass, it's in Latin. Who speaks Latin? The church does. You don't. Right? I don't. So the mendicant orders preach, not in the churches, but on the street corners, and in a language people could understand. Right? In the vernacular. And one of their strategies was to elaborate on the biblical stories. And there were texts that arose with this as well. That would say, what was it really like for the Virgin Mary to give birth to a baby that, without a father? And what was it like for her to hear that angel come into her room at night and say, hey, God's going to make you pregnant? Not enough. They were rude like I am, right? But this was how they wanted you to engage with the story. They wanted to make it something that you could relate to. And that was really part of the mission. Okay. Now, what are the two orders? There's the Franciscans, followers of Saint Francis of Assisi, and the Dominicans, the followers of Saint Benedict of I just forget where. Somewhere in Spain. Right? Both of whom lived in the early 13th century. It was only after they died that their followers set up these orders. They are the two most prominent mendicant orders, Franciscans and the Dominicans. And this influx of a new religious practice that involves outreach in the vernacular, a word that you can relate to, that seems like your life. Right? Can you see the parallel here? John was giving us images that seem like us. Baby Christ acts like babies that we've seen around us. Engages with his mom, even if he's the Virgin Mary, in a way that looks like the way babies engage with their mothers. Yeah, this is absolutely in lockstep with the Franciscans. Now, not every painting Giotto does is made for the Franciscans or the Dominicans, but that influence is incredibly widespread. And that said, our picture was originally one of 7 different altar pieces that Giotto did for one of the side altars in the Franciscan church in Florence. Right? That's where this originally came from. So this is a Franciscan work. We're almost 100% sure. 95% sure or more. Right? that this is the Franciscan work. So it fits in with that mendicant mindset of reaching out in a way that seems like part of your life. Okay? Yeah.
This means that what makes them more realistic, that now they don't live in, they live like inside the community with the people. What makes them more realistic?
What makes it more realistic is, the question is what makes it more realistic? What makes it more realistic is that there's a taste for this now. Giotto's, we talked before about the fact that these works of art are addressing, they're utilitarian objects. They've got to work in the way that people want them to, right, so that they can relate to them. And I think what we're seeing, it's very difficult to put an exact cause and effect on this. I mean, I'm kind of stamping with a bit of that cause and effect, but the cause and effect is that the Franciscans and the Dominicans changed the way people thought about their religion. And Giotto changes his pictures to meet that, right, to meet that expectation. Okay. Now, Giotto's not the only one doing realistic works of art, right, more realistic than the old Byzantine traditions around the same time. Another artist, another most prominent artist is Duccio. Both of these guys have last names we don't really bother with. Giotto di Bondone, Duccio Buoninsegna, you know, we made it easier for you, right? With Duccio's work, right, we've got something different, right? We've got certainly a sense of three-dimensional modeling, but you'll notice he's not as blocky as Giotto is. His figures are a little bit more refined and elegant. The virgin space doesn't have that sort of stuff. Something about Giotto's figures often looks like they're made out of milk cartons. You know, they have a shadowed side and a lit side, and they're just boxy looking, right? Which I kind of like in a way. Duccio's figures are much more attenuated, they're elongated, the fingers are long and thin. The virgin's facial features have a sort of porcelain frailty to them, right? I think Duccio is more beautiful, right? In a lot of different ways. His colors tend to be brighter, right? Giotto's tend to be a bit more muted. That red thing that he's laying on, that once you see it, you can't take your eyes off of it, it's a blob, you know? But that blue is so phenomenal, right? Or down in the foreground, the two women in the green and the violet, right? And look at the range of colors in the angel on the upper right and upper left. It's really fantastic, right? The amount of color. And then the elegance and the decorative qualities that I'm talking about are kicked up to, this will become clear in detail. Look at the hem of the Virgin's garment as it comes over her arms and it comes down by her lower leg. And you can see there's one little line of gold that comes and sweeps its way down. Well, I'm not going to say anything. That's like a liquid, you know? And it adds to the overall effect. And so what we're at here with these two artists, Giotto and Duccio, are two people who are both increasing the amount of realism, but they're doing it in their own personal ways, right? So with all I was saying about the fact that the patrons are driving the relationship, the artists still have some room to exert themselves creatively in an independent, individualized kind of way. Duccio doesn't really look like Giotto. Even though we have gold backgrounds, even though there's a certain artificialness to it, the figures look somewhat different. A little bit more clear when we get a bit closer to her, where we see them now almost the same size, even though she's not holding Christ here. Right? Now we can see some of that difference of Giotto versus Duccio. Some similarity, but all the things I've been saying, I think, come up clearly with this. I can look at my notes to see where it's going. So now, see where I'm supposed to go next. The other big difference between the two, regardless of these subtle differences in style, is that this is a narrative scene. Right? It's not a portrait. It's not an icon. Right? It doesn't derive from icons in the same way. It's a narrative scene. It tells a story. It narrates a story. This is the moment after the birth of Christ. That's what the term nativity means, right? Born, the birth. And we call it the nativity, even though we never really see the nativity. You don't see baby Jesus covered in amniotic fluid, and severing the umbilical cord, which would be the nativity, right? We see the moment after that. So Christ has just been born and now has been laid in the manger, right, in the crib, where in this farm there's an ox and a donkey, right, looking in on him. And we're surrounded by angels on either side. I saw you counting. Giotto does that too, right? In fact, in the online lecture, it is. Okay. That's a very good observation. So we're missing halos for 4 people, right? Above they have halos, but you can't see them because it's gold on gold, right? So the 8 angels on the outside, they do have, and then if you look at this guy right here, you can see the actual side. So, and they're angels anyway. Right? But for the bottom, it's a very good observation. We'll come to that in just a second. They're on the slides yet. They're coming up in a few seconds. Right? But there are some people that don't have halos, right? What was the first thing you said?
I would carry all the people in.
Right. Oh, you're talking about the back turn.
Yeah,
the back turn.
Yeah.
Now, John does that too. And when you go to the online lecture, you'll see that John does that. We didn't see you with this one. Right? So John does that too. And that's part of the realism we're talking about because, Byzantine pictures tend to be closed. Like when you watch watch a tent coil and everybody sits on one side of the table, right? Because nobody has their back to you, right? And that's if it's in front of a live audience, right? This is the same thing. They tend to be closed, but this makes it more realistic that people turn face, right? Like they normally do, right? So the fact that the fellow on the far right has his back to us is, I think, it's realistic. It also works in a very subtle way in helping us to accept that they're not there. They're there for them, right? That has an internal logic where they're there to interact with other people in the picture. That's realistic too, right? Rather than they're simply for you to look at.
I also noticed that those two people and the people on the bottom, everyone else is like Jesus.
Right. That's a very good point. We'll come to that in just a second. So hold that thought. And again, this comes down to where the slides, I have to front load the slides. So we're telling a story, right? And we are starting to point some of them. We'll talk about who those people are in just a second. I'll look at them in detail. Who's this fellow? Who's the old man? The grumpy old man with the halo. It has the Virgin Mary and Jesus in the middle. Joseph, exactly right. That's Mary's husband Joseph, who is not Jesus' father, right? He's his stepfather, because they never consummate their marriage, right? In Catholic faith and Protestant later, right? He is older because the Bible says he is. He marries her when she's very young, like 14 or something. She doesn't look 14 here. But he marries her very young, so he is older than she is. But it also becomes this sort of easy way for artists to show that he is not really her husband. You know what I mean? He's not the father of Christ, because pre-Viagra, right, old man, young wife, right, you can see it. That's what Joseph said, right? Notice the way that the gold has been tooled again, right, around his halo as he looks in from the side. I love the sort of personality it brings to these figures too, right? I don't remember exactly when in the Bible that the Holy Spirit appears to Joseph to say, hey, don't sweat it, she's not been cheating on you. There's a moment, right, it's in Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, or maybe Luke, where he says, that which is created in her is from the Holy Spirit. And Joseph goes, oh, okay, so she's not been out cheating on you. But there's something about this that sort of suggests that human sort of like, what's with this pregnant wife that I've never slept with? That got pregnant after I married her, right? And that, I think that's a bit of a personality being brought to that, a human quality. Okay, here's your guy. Lower right corner, no halos. Who are they? The farmers, right? The shepherds. The very first visitors to see the nativity. They're told by angels that the Savior has been born, and that's what we see happening. So in fact, this picture tells the story, but it tells it in three different steps, all within one frame. There are three different stories here. So one is Joseph, Mary, Jesus, manger, right? The other is the annunciation to the shepherds, the angel announcing to the shepherds that Christ has been born, and this is born, but originally we could have read it, right? Go see Christ, go follow the star, and you see that the angel is talking and pointing to them, because that's the way you talk, like that. But there's this star that they're supposed to follow to come and see Christ. Now they're right there, but the reason they're looking away is because that's a separate story. They haven't seen him yet. It's not the adoration of the shepherds when they come to adore Christ, it's the annunciation to the shepherds. It's the moment before them. And yeah, we've got their sheep. And also, I'm a sucker for dogs. I mentioned this before my wife in class on Monday, but there's two puppies. And I'll usually bring in details of dogs whenever I can. We know that they're shepherds because of the sheep, but also they've got their little sticks that they walk with and bagpipes. They play music. So that little thing looks like a Boda bag. Like you're going to go to a party and squeeze in your mouth and all that. But in fact, it's a little bagpipe. And the shepherds in a lot of non-biblical texts that make it more lively and human make the shepherds into musicians as well, out in the fields playing their pipes, right? They don't have halos because they haven't seen Jesus yet. And that's the moment of their conversion, is when they actually get there and see him. So because they're looking away, they don't have halos yet. Okay. These women are not in the Bible. These are midwives. This is, again, part of that idea of making this more realistic to a 14th century audience. These are the people that helped the Virgin Mary with childbirth, which was the norm. Right? They're obstetric nurses. And that means the kid in the bath is Jesus again. Right? So it's a third scene. We see him twice in the same frame. Right? And that's not uncommon. We see that a lot. Right? So here they are. Now, what's really fascinating to me, because it doesn't work on them as characters, you find them in medieval dramas as well. This one we can see both of her hands. This one we can only see one of her hands. She's hiding one of them under there. According to legend, one of the midwives goes first and verse her and gives her a check. Right? And it does not set a check on the Virgin Mary. This is, again, trying to make it more likely. And because of her lack of faith, her hand ripped. And then the Virgin healed it, and she converted. So this is the moment where she's still got her hand still holding that pot underneath, and it's probably the bigger hand. Right? That has yet to be healed, ergo, no halos yet. Right? So, multiple scenes in one frame. Right? The narrative is what there's a swanky term for this continuous narrative, where you get multiple scenes with the same actor appearing more than once. So Christ appears here twice, right? And we'll see another picture where St. Peter appears 3 times within one frame, right? This is not uncommon in medieval and Renaissance art, right? Something we don't tend to think about. Now, a bit of context for this, right? We talked about subject matter, we talked about style, and talked a bit about historical context. Giotto, as I mentioned, was in Florence. Duccio is just south of that in the city of Siena. These are the two artists who are the most prominent in breaking from tradition, in bringing three-dimensional, lifelike qualities to their works. And it is not a coincidence that they are working in the two cities where we have the largest contingency of bankers and merchants, who are people who are paying for some of these things. We've had a real change in society and how it's made up in the 12th and the 13th centuries. Right? I don't have it in the slides, so I've got to write it up on the board. I'm going to step away from this a bit, and I'll try and talk as loud as I can. So you can hear this, right? Throughout the Middle Ages, the standard makeup of society was what we call feudalism. You've heard this term, right? You took Western too. Yeah? Feudalism, the feudal state. And feudalism is a system of government that's based on inheritance. Right? Kings become kings because their father was king. Right? Dukes become dukes because their fathers were dukes. And so you'll have a king here, and the king will parcel out his kingdom to a series of dukes, who will parcel out their kingdom to a series of counts, who will parcel out theirs to a series of wards, who will parcel out theirs to be worked by the silly peasants, who cannot move up the ladder. Right? And these are usually governed by family relationships, but also by what's called the feudal bond, which is basically the king says, I will use my money and my army to protect you, but you owe me part of the money you make off your property. And that just works its way down the system. The peasants can expect their lords to protect them. They work the field, and what they get in return is no profit, but enough to live. This is the system of government from the 9th century through even into the 16th century. There's still feudalism in certain areas. Okay? In Italy in particular, and in places in Northern Europe, in the 11th and 12th centuries, this starts to break down. And it starts to break down because of cities. When you're a merchant working in a city, you buy and sell spices. You're a fabric merchant, or maybe you're a weaver, maybe you're a baker, maybe you're a musician. Right? You are now making your status. You now can see capitalism, right? The rise of capitalism, where your fate is in your own hands. You can start down here and up here. Right? That runs counter to the feudal system. And the places where we see it, in Italy in particular, are Florence and Siena. Both of which have huge banking systems that spread throughout all of Europe. Right? It is no coincidence that in these two cities we see the new art as well. Right? That change in patronage is the third reason why. We talk about the mendicant orders, we talk about contacts with France. Right? So there's this as well. There's this new kind of person working a new kind of art. It's the kind of art that the rich people had before, but it's different. Right? So these it's important to remember that our men are working in these really important urban centers. Right? Now, the other thing about the context that's important to remember about Duccio's work is, like our Giotto that we saw that was part of a multi-panel work, Duccio's was as well. Duccio's was originally engaged with a number of other pictures seen together. Right? It was huge. Right? That's where Duccio's picture was. Right? At the bottom of this picture, 17 feet across. Right? 10 feet tall. This was the high altar of the main cathedral in the city of Siena. This could not be a more important work. We got it. Part of it. Right? But again, in the 19th century, Siena still has this part. But these are all over the place. These are all over the place. Some of them are missing parts. Right? This is just going to be reconstructed for us to get an idea of what it looks like. Right? So it was a small part of a very big work originally. The part that is occupied was what we call the predella. And I think this comes up on one of the OER sites to talk about that. The strip of painting at the bottom beneath the main body of the altar is called a predella. Up above pinnacles. That's pretty easy actually, right? Pinnacles. Then at the bottom is the predella. So this is one of 7, I think, pictures in the predella. We not only have the nativity, we have the two standing saints on the sides as well, are still done at the National Gallery, right? So, it's really, I think, in many ways, one of the most important works, historically speaking, that the National Gallery owns. Now, this was a huge commission. Right? It originally went on the high altar of Siena Cathedral, somewhere there. Right? You can see it from all the way down the altar. The Virgin Mary, who's seated on the throne here, is the patron saint of Siena. In other words, Arlington's patron saint is St. Thomas More. I always said, that's the idea of building a picture. Their patron saint was the Virgin Mary, and they commissioned the work from Duccio. We have the document for the commission still, which is pretty cool. And actually, he signed it along the front of the throne, and an inscription here that said, I, Duccio, painted this, which is kind of cool, right? It's a new way of thinking about being an artist. And he says, and it's addressed to the Virgin Mary, in the hopes that you, the Virgin Mary, will, shine your graces on the city of Siena and on me for having done this so well. It's something I don't like done here, right? It's a little cocky, but at the same time, it's very humble. I'm only just trying to please you. The city commissioned it in 1308. We have the document. It took him 3 years. He worked on this for 3 years, right? And when he was done, it was delivered from his studio to the cathedral. And the day that it was delivered, the city shut down for a parade. All of the city councilmen, all of the prelates of all of the different parish churches, including the main cathedral, went to Duccio's shop. Torches in hand, ringing bells, singing. All of the churches were ringing their bells. They carried it through the streets of Siena. There's a record of this, right? Carrying it through the streets of Siena to put it in the church. This was a big thing, right? This was huge. And this is again what ours is part of. Right? Can you imagine trying to carry this thing, right? And 17 feet. This part alone, 17 by 10. Yeah. It's not only painted on the front, but it's painted on the back as well, right? So these narrative scenes that we see at the top and the bottom here cover the back. There's 51 different stories from the life of the Virgin Mary and the life of Christ on the Maestà altar. Now, Maestà, Old Italian for majesty, the Virgin sitting majestically in heaven, right? But that's what the entire thing is known as in Maestà. We have this one, and we've got that one as well. Right? Christ telling the apostles to cast your net on the other side, catch more fish. And it's really cute because you'll see it. So this is a huge thing, right? A really big event, and a major commission for Duccio. And we remember that our piece now that hangs in a museum originally had this light. It's very different to that. If you want to know more about it, you can go to the PowerPoint, click on that. There are 2 Smart History videos where they talk about it as well. About 10 minutes worth of video, so if you want to find out more about Duccio's Maestà, you'll hear some of the things I said probably and some things that I didn't say. But there you are. Just, it's not homework, you don't have to. Right? But if you want to, you should go ahead. I hope you want to. When the city was done, right, so the Maestà altar goes on the main altar, the high altar of the cathedral. And when it's installed, the city turns to other artists, including Duccio by his side, to put altar pieces on either side, 4 more, 2 per side. On either side, right? So as you walk into the cathedral, so you see the main altar from the nave, the center, and then on the side there are secondary altars, 4 of them. And they commissioned 4 more paintings, 2 per side. Each of them does a scene from the life of the Virgin Mary. She's the patron, right? So Simone Martini, Michaela, was one of Duccio's pupils. Right? When he was an artistic apprentice grinding up paint, he was doing it for Duccio. He gives the commission for the Annunciation scene that's over here on the left, leading up to this, right? And it repeats, right, because the Annunciation is right here on Duccio's work as well. But there's a bigger one. So you can imagine this is pretty big as well. And there's the angel announcing, Annunciation, announcing to the Virgin Mary that she is going to bear the Son of God. Right? We'll quickly look at some details here and then we'll quit. Again, the kind of details we've been talking about, the realism of these pieces is fantastic. I love in Simone's work and some of Duccio's as well, the interest in patterned fabric. Look at that orange. That's great. Just fantastic, right? Siena, one of its principal exports was textiles. So it makes sense that Duccio and Simone Martini are really keen on great fabric. I like the fact that the angel looks like he's wearing a Burberry cape or something, right? It's got that sort of plaid pattern in the back there. But we see these amazing patterns everywhere. And here she's listening to the angel. She's got a little bit of my cloak, right? You mean what? Straighten up what? And the words that the angel says are actually on the surface of the gold. You can see the last of the letters here, coming directly from the mouth of the angel to the ear of the Virgin, right? Because this is how the miracle happens. It's from hearing, right? And the words are there. Ave Maria, Ave Gratia Plena, behold, full of grace. Dominus tecum, God is with you. Right? And those are the words that stream across, right? As the angel gives her message. She's been reading, which I really like. This is a way of giving her better status. Most people couldn't read. The Virgin can. By the way, in a patriarchal society like this, when people couldn't read, more men could read than women, too. So a reading woman has some status, right? And she stopped her reading to sort of listen to what he's saying, and she's a little skeptical of that. It seems. There's a lily between the two of them, and now we can see the words a bit more clearly. The lily was a symbol for the Virgin Mary. It was believed to be the tallest flower. It's not, but that's what they said. She's the greatest woman. It's white. Purity. She's the Virgin, right? These are the reasons. The angel, right, Gabriel, holds in his hand a laurel branch. Bay tree, right, babies. Laurel is a symbol of peace. This is to bring the peace to the world, right? And gesturing up, right, the Holy Spirit at the top, surrounded by angels. That's what the message is like. As he's speaking, right? And again, textiles. Everywhere we look. Right? And again, we're going to dive in closer to the angel's white robe, and you can see this amazing, splendid textile. Right? It's fantastic. Again, very elegant, like Duccio. You'd be okay mistaking Simone for Duccio. Lots of people do. Right? Because he studied under Duccio. Okay, we'll take a break. Not take a break. We'll take a break for a week, right? I'll see you guys next Thursday. Remember on Tuesday, Monday, so I'll get this recording up later this evening after dinner, and hopefully it sounds better. And this weekend I'll try to play with that microphone, and maybe we can get it better.